Hey TV fans, Bored Now back with you. On this video I'm going to be talking about Yellowjackets Season 3 Episode 7. The episode is called Croak. Yes, croak as in a frog's croak. More on that in a moment. So we're introduced to these three backpackers at the start of this episode. They are Edwin, Hannah and Cody. Cody with a funny spelling, but he is played by Joel McHale of Community fame, and finally he debuts in season 3. The opening of this episode does a very Lost style of gimmick. It does something which Lost did, like in a particular episode in, I think it was season 3 or 4. Lost episode, the whole episode was dedicated to those characters, where they showed you the backstory of these others from the time they first arrived on the island. So it was literally a counterpoint to the regular characters and an explanation to exactly what got these other characters to the point. So the difference is that this doesn't take up the whole episode, but it's a very similar gimmick. Get a backstory for them as long as they've been in the wilderness, and a bit like that episode of Lost, what leads them to encountering the Yellowjackets. Wilderness, we get a lot of good tense survival horror and drama, and that's something the show from the very start has excelled really well at. So Jennifer Morrison comes back for this episode, and she directed the trial episode earlier in the season, and I praised her direction in that. She again does a very good job in this episode, so she was definitely a good choice to direct. A complaint, like a small complaint, it's just the fact that because we don't know these three characters, they were only introduced at the very end of the last episode, then it does make the beginning of this episode, because it's a good, 10-15 minutes at least that we spend with the characters doing this backstory. Actually just makes it a bit less interesting, because we have nothing really invested in these characters. I think the way it was handled in the Lost episode was a lot better. Like they really made the gimmick work, and it was like an important backstory. Probably if more of the episode was taken up with this stuff, I would be more critical. And it's not even that the stuff we get is bad. It's fine enough. Like, I'm quite interested in the characters. The actors are doing a decent job. It's just we don't really know them, we're not invested, so we don't really have that much of a reason to care. Of all things, they are frog scientists, and they are actually in this wilderness to examine frogs, because it is like the mating season for frogs. And I mean, that's pretty amazing. Out of all the things that I would have guessed the title of the episode, I mean, Croak for a frog seems natural, but I never would have guessed that it was a frog related thing, and I never would have guessed that they were frog scientists and that's why they were in the wilderness. I think most people just thought they were like backpackers or something, but that's the reason why they're there. We do get a very kind of trippy Yellowjacket style opening, where we see it actually opens with the frogs and one particular frog, and then he goes into like a whole batch of other frogs, and we see that the mating is starting to happen. They're crying out, and yeah, just the visuals of it and the green, the way they capture the green is very sort of illuminating and quite sort of tripping on that whole metaphor of the wilderness, like connecting with nature, and something they have played with, because that's something I think is at play to a certain extent, more than other people. Like I think other people think that isn't such a big factor. If you go back to the trial episode, I think the wilderness had an influence on Shona and on the other Yellowjacket. So Edwin is the more kind of nerdy, uptight one. Hannah is I think she's just a colleague, because it's brought up later on when she's defending Cody, then she seems to have a crush on him, because that's something Edwin says. So I don't know if he's got a crush on Hannah. Hannah is a little bit of like the more gentle one, if you like, very sort of reserved but quite friendly. Whereas Cody is the one who's the kind of more hyper masculine, tough one, who's like constantly trying to like provoke things and be kind of a bit out of the box, if you like. It's their guide, which is the main purpose why he's with them. So there's a little bit of an untrust, like, can they trust him? Because at one point they get this frog in the jar, and then there's this sort of playful fight which borders on flirting but borders on "you're really pissing me off" between Cody and Hannah, where they start to wrestle around and they're fighting over the radio, and the radio actually gets broken at one point. It appears to be an accident, but Edwin isn't so sure. He thinks because he doesn't trust Cody, Cody might have done it on purpose, and that's at the point Hannah starts defending him, even though like clearly she should be pissed. But there's some parallels with them and the Yellowjackets, and their transmitter getting broken was a big blow for them potentially getting out of the cool something. Play it cool. Don't sweat it. I'm your bridge out of here. And I like that. I like that almost as a comparison to the other group where they were talking about Coach Ben being the bridge out of there. But I sort of almost like Cody as a counterpoint to Coach Ben, because he is a very different character. And I probably found him the most interesting in the episode of the three, just because I think Joe McHale was having a lot of fun playing this more like chiseled kind of... I mean, he's naturally got the charisma to play the sort of charismatic, roguish bad boy, but also I think just him being a bit unconventional and a bit like of a bad guy, if you like. I think he really enjoyed that, and yeah, I think at least they make the three characters quite different, and they kind of show you the tension between them. Little joke where it's like Edwin says, "Oh, I can smell a barbecue. There must be other people out here," and that leads them to basically where we were at the end of the last episode, where they wander over out of curiosity. And of course the barbecue is Coach Ben. We pick up from where last week was left off, and that's how we go to credits. Like, the only thing we get which is different is the Optimus van is like, "We're going home." That's like her first thought. And I can only assume that's a knee-jerk reaction, or that's just instinct, like she was about to say that before Edwin laid eyes on the dead body of Coach Ben and laid eyes on the fact that they'd been eating from him. Misty tried to do her best to cover it, just saying Ben died of natural causes, he fell. Things escalate a lot faster than I expected, because I expected there to be all this debate, all this back and forth with the characters discussing, with certain Yellowjackets maybe thinking, let's try and win them over, let's try and befriend them, explain things, or at least come up with a story which is more likely to ingratiate us to him. And then other Yellowjackets, Shona being an obvious one, just saying, no, screw them, we've got to kill them. And Shona pretty much does do that, but things do escalate faster than I thought, because Lottie, out of nowhere, he kills Edwin, so Edwin wasn't long for this world. I don't know how I feel about that, but, you know, a death out of the blue always ups the stakes. At least it's a character which he only had a small part. He retaliates with a bow, because that's one of his big things, is that he likes to shoot bows. He retaliates, he shoots Melissa, and that's going to obviously raise Shauna's ire. She gets hit in the arm, so she's wounded, she's not dead. Shauna, before most of them go after the two others because they flee, Shauna warns Lottie and Mari to try and look after and fix Melissa's wound. I think she says to Mari, if she dies, you die, so very firm stuff. And then we get a big portion of this side of the story is them tracking the other two. Cody suggests then they split up and they go their separate ways. And yeah, this is when the survival stuff really comes into play, because it's very... At first it's very frantic, but then later on, when we get people splitting up and a lot of cat and mouse hiding about, it becomes a lot more slow-paced and tense, intriguing things happening. So it is very well done. And I think you're particularly invested in Hannah because you're sort of seeing her as like the more innocent one in all this, whereas Cody has been a pretty effective antagonist. The most tense scene though is when she goes under a tree bark and she's just laying there for a long time hoping they won't see her, and Natalie at one point wanders past and is like looking around on the ground, and it comes very close to like her eye line meeting where Hannah is. And then eventually Hannah, because Shauna is also like nearby searching around, so Hannah eventually, I think, just thinks the best thing maybe is to give herself up. So she does that, and Natalie's first response is very different to Shauna's, not surprisingly, where she's like, "Don't worry, we're not gonna kill you." So she's trying to calm her down, and I think she probably means that. But then Shauna's like straight away on the aggressive, like she grabs her, turns her around, like ties up her hands, and is just threatening her. She's naturally got that us against them mentality, whereas Natalie is offering a bit more of a rational sort of mind. Hannah buys herself a bit more time because she says, "I know where you can get first aid supply." Eventually, back at camp, they do get the arrow out of Melissa's arm, and it's Jen's idea to force it through the other way. Then that's the last resort. So a very ruthless but resourceful idea from Jen, and it's very uncomfortable to watch, very realistic, but it does the trick. Strong reaction to what Lottie did as well, so she suddenly made herself a lot more unpopular, because like her whole line is the wilderness doesn't want them, so that's like a whole thing. Like she's still very much thinking of that, and very much thinking about it's down to what the wilderness wants, like almost like she trusts the wilderness, and it's that very spiritual thing of there's a plan, and if they're not part of the plan, then they're no good. Whereas the others are thinking a lot more traditionally of, well, these people could help us get out of there, and you've put that at jeopardy. So like one of them, I think it's Mari. It's either Mari. No, I think it's Jen actually. Jen like basically tells her to fuck off with that shit, which we pick up in the present, really, when you think about some of the stuff with Lottie in the present. I also quite like the scene with Ty and Van when they come across the tent. Immediately goes to their radio and thinking that she can maybe try and call home, only to find out it doesn't work. But they also find rations and supplies, so that's obviously a good thing, and they can at least take advantage of that. But Van is pushing the idea that they can help us get out. And that does up the stakes, because at this point in the episode, you've got like some of the others like still hunting down Hannah and Cody. And a little bit of the stakes are raised again, because it seems like Ty and Van are very much interested in keeping her alive. But yeah, by the end of the episode, Hannah, she returns to the camp with them and introduces herself. There's a lot of speculation about Hannah being Pit Girl, because for a long time it was assumed it was Mari, but this new element which has now been introduced, and if we are getting towards the point where they could be in a position to go home eventually, then it does make some sense that Hannah could be Pit Girl, because it's confirmed in the present timeline later by Shona that Hannah does die, and it's pretty good odds she dies in the wilderness from what we hear. But whether that makes her Pit Girls, but she does have the right colour hair, she's got the right sort of build, so it makes her a pretty good candidate. As far as Cody goes, Akira and Travis are kind of like tracking him, and he actually goes off a cliff and they both save him. And I think that comes down to he's quite lucky it was those two, like two of maybe the more rational thinking ones in the group. But they were also thinking, yeah, this guy could help us go home. So again, they're thinking more along those lines, so they pull him up and ask him to take them home, basically. So, I mean, that's an interesting element, because really we don't know what Cody would do, like, and what he's capable of, because he is a dangerous element. He's quite unpredictable. Are they right maybe to trust him? He's at their mercy a little bit in the scene, so maybe he doesn't have a lot of choice but to trust them. But yeah, could he snap? Could he turn on them? I really just loved the survival horror in the wilderness scene. I thought it was all really well done. And I hope at the very least we get a few weeks of Hannah where she makes it to the end of the season, because there's definitely potential with the character. I'm wondering if with Cody, if he might break off, like if we do start to get factions within the Yellowjackets, I wonder if he could be like an antagonist, and he could favour one faction over the other, or he could just get off on like playing them against each other. I think that's a possibility, and I could see Joel McHale having a lot of fun with that stuff. And this is also a really good episode in the adult timeline. There's a lot of stuff I enjoyed in that, and I think a big part of that is that it's a little bit of a throwback for the adult timeline, because we get another road trip with the main characters. So the Yellowjackets are back together in the adult versions and going on a fun little road trip to try and get to the heart of a problem, try and like solve a mystery. So it does feel like a little bit of a throwback to season 1, because probably a little bit of the frustration at times in the adult timeline in season 2 might have been just the sense of they're all separated for a lot of the season. They came together at the end of the season, and I think a lot of that stuff was really well done, but there was probably frustration throughout the season than there wasn't more of them as like a group. So when you do get them as a group, because they are so effective and they really bring out some of the best out of each other as a group, and they go on these little like road trips or like missions, journeys to try and figure something out, it's actually really satisfying. And another thing I appreciate in this episode is then as things slowly start to come out, they do start speculating on things of possible who could be this, who could be this, that, because the red herring stuff or the murder mystery stuff is another strong point about the adult timeline in this episode. So I think for the adult timeline, this might be the best episode of the season. Like, it's the best we've seen of the adults story this season, I would say, for sure. So the first we see is of Shona, who is still listening to the tape. We see that it's really getting to her. She listens to the screams and she talks to Jeff, and once again you feel sorry for Jeff because he's trying to keep his family together. He's worried about his wife again going off the rails, and she says, you need to stay with Callie. You need to look after her and keep her safe and keep her in line. Because, again, this is a follow-on from last week where Shona found out that Callie was monitoring her with the tape, recording her every kind of action, which is a little bit self-serving because it seems, again, then because it was something which put Shona out of joint, put her on the back foot and was something which inconvenienced her. It seems then, okay, we need to keep her in line now, regardless of what's best for Callie and what's best for the family in general. So that's probably quite informed for Shona, but she makes that case to Jeff, and he agrees to stay with Callie for the episode. And I'm not really complaining because, as I said, it does lead to some good stuff with the adult Yellowjackets. So later on, Shona goes over to see Misty. Well, she's surprised that Misty is there because they've had this rivalry that's been going kind of all season. And I am very much Team Misty, not surprisingly. But they come over, and Shona reveals that, based on what she heard on the tapes and her own research, and I'm assuming some of her memories from what happened in the wilderness, she has figured out then the person who has been stalking her and the person who sent the tape is Hannah's daughter. Because there's a scene in the wilderness where Hannah left a message for her daughter on the tape, so it's a pretty fair assumption that probably is this tape, and Shona has listened to that message. And it's basically Hannah, who at that point was fearing for her life, probably almost certain that she was going to end up dead, so she's leaving a final message for her daughter. So Shona's big idea is that the daughter is the one who's been sending the tapes. Now that does bring up a lot of questions about how did it get out of the wilderness, and how did it get to this person, whoever it may be, whether it's Hannah's daughter or someone else. I think it's fair to assume that person is going to be Hilary Swank, whoever it is. But we learn that Hannah had a daughter very young, I think she's like a teenager, and Shona also confirms that Hannah is dead. Then she did die in the wilderness because she reads her obituary to the Yellowjackets. So this is really powerful stuff, and I think what it does that's really effective, it does give you a good motivation for Shona in the present, like a good motivation to go and tackle this and like fix this and solve the problem. But it also gives a good reason for the characters to work together as a group, because they've all got a common goal, and it's that idea of, if we work with Shona, we can probably get to the heart of this. So Shona has figured out then it's in Virginia where this person is meant to be based. So they head out on a road trip. You get a little bit of back and forth with Misty and Shona. You get Misty pointing out that Shona has a bit of a track record, so she's still kind of accusing Shona. And by the way, because of some of the evidence so far, it's possible Shona could be the killer of Lottie. If you're thinking about that, that's if you assume the killer of Lottie is a different person to who sent the tape. I think it is, personally. I think they are different people. But Misty's putting shade back on Shona, and I enjoy Van agreeing. Van is right there with her. She's like, yeah, that does make some sense. But Shona is steadfast. It's not her. Well, we'll see about that. They go on this journey. We get some good dialogue between the characters, some good theorising when they're in like the car, or at one point they stop off at a diner. And I like scenes like this because obviously you get a lot of speculation from the fandom. And sometimes when you're watching a drama, it can seem like a bit like, why aren't the characters bringing up these possibilities? So they're actually discussing who could have brought the tape back from the wilderness. And it's Van who says it can't be even either Jen or Melissa because they are both dead. And there's been a lot of speculation about this because they also mention how Jen and Melissa apparently got close to Hannah at one point. So I'm guessing we're going to see that in the coming episodes. We're going to see that in the next few episodes before the end of the season, which might be where Hannah meets her fate. But according to Fan, and the others seem to confirm this, Melissa and Jen are dead. They didn't make it out of the wilderness. Whether that means they were left for dead or they know for sure they're dead, I'm not certain about that, because I stick to my guns and say that I think Melissa probably at the very least did survive. I'm not sure about Jen, that's a bit more up in the air. Melissa, she's got the connection to Shana. I don't think it's 100% they're both dead. Van asks the question, like, Ty, why did you talk to Lottie in the city before she died? Ty says it's because she asked her the question about what happened at the end of season 2, where she had that line about the wilderness. The wilderness hears us. What did she mean about that? One of the reasons why I'm not so sure it's Ty who killed Lottie is because I think she would have had to have done it pretty fast, and also she would have had to have set the scene up pretty fast because she did go back and spend the rest of the night with Van. So I just think it would have had to be a very quick thing. And I'm not sure she had quite enough time to have achieved all that, bearing in mind it looks like whoever did it set up the candles to make it look like a ritual. And I mean, I don't know if it would take that long. It depends what method the actual death was. A little bit of a struggle because of what we saw, the scratch marks on the wall, but that's partly why I think Ty isn't the one who killed Lottie, and also because I do believe Ty burnt down the cabin in the past, and I'm not convinced they would have her be like the answer to two big questions. One of my favourite scenes of the episode is the scene where Walter texts Misty saying he's matched the two sides, so the sample taken from Lottie's fingernails and the hair sample, which of course we know he got from Shana, and it appears to point to Shana being the killer, and that's the text message. So potentially a big reveal. It wouldn't be the most shocking thing, frankly, if Shana does turn out to be the killer. I think there would be a lot of sense. You wonder where they might go from there, however, considering at this point, well, she's a main character. Does it mean ultimately her fate is sealed, or does it mean she's going to get away with it somehow? But because of that stuff, because the writers are at the very least hoping they'll get a couple more seasons after this. The possibility is that it could be Callie, since they have the same DNA pattern, I should say. But Callie really has the motivation. I'm not too convinced on that, but it does put Shona back in the spotlight. But it's a great scene because Misty is on edge because it's Shona driving the car at that point. So she starts texting the Yellowjackets, the other Yellowjackets in the car, and points out what Walter has told her. A bit of comedy mixed in with some good tense drama because Shona's in the back seat and Misty, when she gets the text from Walter, says who it is. So they've been teasing Misty a little bit in the episode about, why do you still have contact with the guy? You should cut him adrift. Like saying he's not, like you're too good for him and things like that. You're such a pushover. So when Shona gets wind of it, she starts giving Misty a little bit of stick from the front seat. But because they start texting back and forth, she also starts getting suspicious. I needs to go to the bathroom desperately. It can't wait till we get there. And Shona is just refusing to do it. And that is something which could make her look guilty. Like, why would she refuse? Unless it's just literally that she doesn't want any more stops, or then it's natural instinct. She smells something up. She's like, they're keeping something from me. And Van, out of the blue, forces her hand because Van vomits blood, meaning her condition has again worse, and that causes them, they're forced to take a detour off the road, and they've got to get her to the hospital. That could be fate intervening, or it could literally just be a coincidence where her disease naturally hit a bumpy patch at that point. Ty goes with her into the room, which perfectly leaves Misty and Shona to reunite their feud, and that's when Misty points out what she's found out, and that accuses her. Shona tries to bat it away. She's very firm then she wasn't the killer. She says basically Lottie was in her house, so the dirt and that could have got under her fingernails from that, but that's not the most convincing thing because it is very hard for dirt to get under fingernails unless you like really try. To the operating room with Van potentially on death's door, we get a man who is ranting and raving about the devil, and I think a good theory then he might be in tune with Dark Tide being in the room. Van has always said for a long time now that in many ways we should just accept my fate. We should accept and I may only have a certain amount of time to live and just enjoy ourselves. That's always been her vibe. That's why I think the New York trip a few episodes back was such a big deal for Van. Van is visited in visual form by her younger self from the wilderness, and this is a callback to the vision that Team Van had a few episodes ago with the whole fire thing in the cabin, and she appears to her and there's flames, and flame is like engulfing around adult Van, and she starts freaking out, but she has this moment with the younger version of herself, and younger Van says to her, did you really think you had cheated death? Almost like it's that thing of, because you got lucky in the wilderness and have continued to survive and have survived up to now with this fight against cancer, did you really think that was going to last? Like you were always going to be able to cheat death? So that seems to be a very clear sign that with Van now in the hospital and her condition worsening again, then this is like a symbol, like this moment symbolises that Van, it could be close to the time that we lose her. So with a few episodes to go, it would maybe feel a natural time to say goodbye to Van, which would be very sad because I would miss Lauren Ambrose. She's been a great addition to this cast, and I'm really invested in the Van Ty relationship, so it would be sad to see that come to an end. But we have been prepared for this moment potentially, and Van herself, to be fair to her, has also been prepared for it. She's had a very level head about the whole situation. But, I mean, for a while at least, many people, including myself, were believing that Van potentially could survive. Then there could be another twist where somehow she is cured, or somehow she just keeps survives because of younger Van visiting her now in this state with her older version now in hospital. I think that is probably quite a big indicator that we're going to lose Van sooner rather than later. Misty and Shauna have had another one of their fights, and Shauna very much has tunnel vision. She goes off on her own anyway. It's like, screw this. Once again, it shows a little bit of a self-centered side to Shauna, because one of her close friends is in a desperate way, and another one of her close friends is her girlfriend and is by her side and very worried about her. And Shauna chooses this moment to bugger off and go to the house of this person who she believes is Melissa's daughter and is the one who's been sending the tapes. And that's the cliffhanger of the episode, and I think it's a very good cliffhanger. So Shauna literally pulling up outside this house. It's this idea of then Shauna was always going to be the one who has to face up to this stuff. She probably does have to do it by herself. She's got a knife holster, and that is just a nice little touch which I think is really good, because in the past Melissa gave her the knife holster. Whoever it is, it's going to be Hilary Swank. So whoever this person is, whoever left the tape, it looks like it's Hilary Swank. I really enjoyed this episode. I think it's up there for the best episode of the season, and there's very little to complain about. It may be just a little bit of a slow start, but I can see also why they did that stuff. But once you get past the opening of the episode and get into what the episode's really doing in both timelines, I think it's a very strong episode. And by the way, before I forget, there's one little bit with Callie and Jeff back at the hotel. I almost forgot this. And this is a good lead into Shauna pulling up outside this character's house, because Callie has been doing some of her own research about the tape, and she reveals to Jeff, who's oblivious to all this as always, she reveals to Jeff the tape is linked to frog scientists, which gets a bit of a bemused laugh from Jeff, but in the same area, and went missing around the time of the Yellowjackets. So they were in the same area and disappeared. That's pointing out to Jeff, what if that's what they're hiding? And there's something which is really dramatic and ironic, which just works so well if it actually means that Callie could be the one who puts her mum and the other Yellowjackets in danger. Like, if it is Callie poking around at the secrets which they've been trying to hide all these years. So that does present some really great possibilities, and I think it's why Callie being upgraded to a bigger role this season does make a lot of sense, and there's still some good things which they can do with the character. So that's the episode. It's very good. I'm really annoyed that I'm going away and I have to catch up on the last few episodes when I come back, but that's just a timing thing. But this is, a very good episode of Yellowjackets, and I'm excited now to see the last few of the season. I think we've got an interesting few weeks ahead. So thanks for listening, guys. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe as always. Share me out, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.